Lost Dimensions is the most popular Stikbot fan-made franchise, with each installment having a plethora of YouTubers, each breaking its own record in its respective right. It generates massive hype anytime a new one is announced, and given the track record of most of these creators, I can definitely see why. And since the new movie, Lost Dimensions 3, has just been premiered, and since it's absolutely breaking records, I figured I might as well give a kind of retrospective on the trilogy as a whole. Even though every time a new movie comes out it's praised to heaven and back, none of these movies are without their flaws. And while people are very vocal about that, they don't tend to actually say what those flaws are. At least not to the director's face. So I'll be going as in-depth as I can possibly go. Another thing, this is simply just a review. It's not actually an attack on Apocalypse or any of the team behind this movie, because, you know, I was obviously a part of all these. So there's not gonna be any bias, I'm just simply reviewing and giving my thoughts on all the movies. And it's a Stikbot movie, there's nothing to start any wars about or anything in the comments. So without further ado, I present to you the Lost Dimensions Trilogy Retrospective. Working title, I'm not sure what I'm gonna call this video. Lost Dimensions is a classic and is held in high regards in the community, for very good reason. While the plot is very linear and the movie is very fast paced, it all flows together pretty smoothly. However, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have any flaws. For one, the audio. Good God, the audio. If it's not a scene made by Apocalypse, then the audio quality is absolutely terrible. It sounds very like crisp and like microwave or something. I don't know how to describe it. Just hear it for yourself.
Almost got it.
Otherwise, the animation is pretty consistent overall. Can't really complain there, except all the resolution sucks. Now, while this is a problem with the movie, it's actually justified, being that all the scenes were sent through Instagram, which automatically translates the resolution to 360 quality. So chalk it up to technical limitations, I guess. Anyway, the humor of the movie is pretty good, with the scenes by Oz Animations and Lego Stikbot scenes definitely being highlights. Of course, there was probably some others, but those just really stood out to me. Otherwise, not really too much there. There wasn't actually that much action either, unless you count hopping through portals every 40 seconds action. And the characters are pretty basic. They're all basically cameos with the exception of Blue and Silver, who are alright here. There also isn't a particular hero or villain, unless you count the scene at the end where Blue throws Silver into another dimension for some dumb reason, which is pretty villain-like if you ask me. Otherwise, pretty one-dimensional. No pun intended. The movie was mainly plot-focused and uses the characters to tell the story. Pretty basic movie with a really cool concept. Nothing particularly bad about it, but it could use some big improvements. And with the sequel, it could definitely fix those errors. At the end of the movie, Blue says that if he wants to fix the universe, even though there wasn't anything shown to actually be wrong with the universe, he'll need some help setting up a sequel. Giving it a score, I'm gonna have to go with the light 7 out of 10 on this one. Now it's time to watch Blue on his next adventure. The movie considered by most to be the magnum opus of the Stikbot community and the Lost Dimensions trilogy as a whole. And in some ways I'd have to agree. This is a huge accomplishment and I respect and commend Apocalypse for putting this whole thing together. While this movie is a big improvement from the other and probably objectively better, it still has a crap ton of problems. But for positivity's sake, let's start off with the positives. There's a lot more action in this one. This movie feels like it's going somewhere, it has much more of a purpose. Kind of makes you wonder why this feeling was completely absent for the third movie, but we'll get to that later. Very grand in scale, and you can really feel it throughout a lot of the scenes. There's also a lot of good humor. Like, there's a lot of callbacks to the previous movie, which is always nice to see. Some examples being the chicken guy, and again, Lego Stikbot and Oz animation scenes. In most of the collaborator scenes, the audio is like 1,000 times better than it was from the last movie. Sure, there's still a couple of scenes where the audio is pretty bad, but it's way better compared to the last one. And all the scenes are pretty enjoyable in their own right too. The animation quality is very consistent and it's a big step up from the last movie. Sadly, I think that's where my positives end though. So, now let's get into the third act, baby. Woo! Oh, this is gonna be good. I mean, it's not, but like, me reviewing it, you get it. Alright, so the first and second act were pretty much flawless, not that much problems, it's overall pretty solid. But then, this freaking third act basically just ruins the entire movie. Or, well, it's way worse, I would say. First of all, The audio quality on the cameo characters, it's so freaking bad. Oh my god, you gotta listen to this.
Oh crap.
You do realize I'm right next to you and can still hear you, Marshmallow Guy, right?
There's no music, you can barely make out anyone's audio. Most of the people that Blue gathered from the dimensions just sit there and do nothing. Silver's death is really confusing, and Blue killing him was absolutely completely unnecessary, and was so legitimately stupid. Speaking of, Blue is way more of a villain than Silver. He killed him for no reason, and he was the one that made all the multiverses, or universes I guess, act up. Although, the third act does have some, kind of improved animation. It's much more on a grander scale than the last one, because the last one didn't really have any scale. But otherwise, yeah, everything is just worse. And the pacing, dude, the pacing for the whole movie is just all over the place. It just goes from fast to slow to fast, and then so fast you can barely understand what's happening. A bit more personal here, it took me multiple asking of what happened to Silver, did he die at the end of the movie? Like, I asked that to so many people, and it took me like a couple of months, I think it was like 6 months to even piece together what actually happened, and a couple of rewatches. So that's just a personal thing, not really a stab at the movie, but it's really confusing when someone has to rewatch your movie multiple times in order to understand what's happening. Maybe I'm just dumb, probably both, I don't know. But the third act just makes the whole movie look like a joke, peaking so much with the first and second act that the third act just does not do it justice. So it probably sounds like I hate this movie, right? Well, yes, but actually no. You see, even with the third act, this movie is a huge improvement over the first one. It has way more action, laughs, more references and callbacks to the first movie. Those last two not really being, scored towards the movie, but they're just nice to have. The characters, mainly Blue and Silver and kind of Yellow, I guess, they have more to do, but they're still basically catalysts towards the plot, rather than their own characters, especially Yellow, who's literally only there to push a button. While it is technically an improvement, it makes Act 3 a chore to sit through with all the two-dimensional characters. Again, no pun intended. Especially Blue, who I was rooting against the entire time, with Silver actually having a decent justifiable motivation. And Blue being the one that started all this, plus he's mean to Yellow for absolutely no reason, and he has no likable or redeemable character traits whatsoever. Really, all I wanted to see at that point was Blue's portal hijinks for the rest of the movie. Although, considering the weird all-over-the-place pacing of this movie, it probably is for the best that they didn't drag that out. Because imagine dragging out portal hijinks, right? Okay, I'll calm down. Look, I'm not looking for masterful story or characters out of a freaking Stikbotnt movie. I just want story and characters that I can get by, as well as being consistently engaging or entertaining as possible. And it just wasn't it for me. In the end, this has a lot of problems, but overall, I still really love this movie. And it being the most hyped Stikbotnt movie in the community at the time, I'll say it was well deserved. And mostly lives up to the hype. Overall, 7.5 out of 10. I know that sounds pretty insane with all the negatives that I was giving it, but it improves over a lot from the original, so it kind of evens out in that way. Now, here's where things get quote-unquote insane. Lost Dimensions 3, the big one. And it's my least favorite one. Now don't get me wrong, all of these people in one huge movie is nothing short of an accomplishment, and it's definitely nothing to sneeze at. The movie is super creative, all these different animation styles, cool environments. The scenes with music are really good. This movie has a lot of highlights, especially from the first 15 to 20 minutes. Well, actually, really only from the first 15 to 20 minutes. Because everything after that is basically just a downward spiral of mediocrity, in my opinion. The first 15 to 20 minutes of this movie are just absolute perfection in a Stikbotnt movie. It was so mind-blowing to see my expectations go from, it'll probably be alright, to, wow, this is really amazing. Was I actually wrong about this? Like, a lot of the movie's best scenes were in those first 15 to 20 minutes, but not gonna lie, after that, it just kinda got boring. It's not only boring with the third installment, and they don't really change anything up besides the fact that Chloe and Blue can shapeshift. So it gets really repetitive really fast. Maybe in like the first 10 minutes or so, you kinda just wanna stop watching. But there's still a lot of engaging scenes to keep you in. And that's one of the greatest strengths of this movie. It really hooks you in for the first Yeah, 15 to 20 minutes. I know I've been saying that a lot, but trust me, that's really the only good part of the movie. Not to say that the scenes after that weren't good, there was a lot of good ones, but it was just so, like, predictable and boring. Like, the blue formula. Like, he goes to the portal. Where am I? Oh, this dimension is weird. I'm leaving. Or, where am I? Oh no, there's a weird thing that's gonna chase after me. Guess I better leave. Then he leaves. Blue shapeshifting is a nice change of pace, but it still boils down to basically the same exact concept. And when you're doing the same type of formula for 3 movies, it kind of gets tiring. Especially in this movie, considering that it takes up at least 3/4 of the runtime, I think. So it gets really old really fast, and the third act doesn't save it, sadly. It still has a lot of problems with the previous movie, like a lot of the audio being hard to hear. The lack of music really takes you out of the action, and the fact that most of the characters are voiced by Apocalypse is also another downside. Not saying that his voice is bad or anything, but it's just really repetitive and kind of boring when you hear it for a lot of the characters. The third act is basically a carbon copy of the last movie. Actually, that's a good way to put it for the entire movie. It's basically the same exact movie as Lost Dimensions 2, with a couple of minor changes, and there's a lot of stuff taken out of it that made the second one so enjoyable. There's a couple of improvements with the third act, like how, at the end, where the characters go is a bit more clear than the last movie. Trying not to spoil anything since it's relatively new. But yeah, like I said, this movie is really creative, but at the same time, it's so devoid of any creativity and passion from the last movie that it basically feels like you're watching the same movie. Actually, if you watch them back to back, I bet you couldn't even tell that it was a different video. It's just more of the same, and it kind of feels boring and generic, and like all the passion was taken out of it. Like, it felt kind of rushed in a way. Like, this movie took way longer production-wise to make than the second movie. The second movie was way better, by the way. This movie just doesn't have its own identity. Besides having Moonshine Animations and Stikbotnt Central, and Edbound and a couple of other famous people for like 5 seconds, it's still not different enough to call its own movie. It's basically a Lost Dimensions 2 remake. Comparing this movie as if the second one didn't exist, all these problems would still be here, except for the fact that it's basically the same movie. There would be much more, like, creativity stuff felt like that, but that's not really, like, problems with the movie in general. It's more problems with the movie's identity. Problems with the movie are things like, the first Lost Dimensions movie was kind of like a Saturday morning cartoon, half an hour special, which it was not really action-packed, but it was still pretty chill to watch. This one is kind of like that one, except for it's boring. It's not chill, it's not like you could just relax and watch it. This movie is the type of movie that you'd probably fall asleep on. But they aren't as funny as the last two. Probably the most funniest joke, again, was the scene from Lego Stikbot. Like I said, this is super boring. Outside of the, like, first 5 to 10 minutes, there's basically no action. There's a couple of humorous scenes. The story is basically the same as the last one. The character motivations make no sense. The characters are as boring as ever, with them not even being characters. They were pretty two-dimensional before, but now they're basically just one-dimensional. Blue is just, he basically doesn't even exist. Yellow has no reason to be there. Silver, who also got decapitated in the last movie, is brought back through time travel for literally no reason. He does nothing and is just there to say that the movie has time travel in it. The plot is all over the place and there's way too much exposition. There's no music, which makes things really boring and takes you out of the action, or quote-unquote action. It's just kind of sad to see a movie that was this hyped be such a letdown to so many people. And I know I'm not the only one. It's literally just Lost Dimensions 2, but more personal, I guess. In a way, this kind of feels like a studio product. I'm not sure. It just feels like it was printed out, maybe? I don't really know how to describe it, but it was such a disappointment. This movie was so hyped to so many people. Not really me, because the way that the trailers and plot was going, I knew it was going to be the same movie. I just think, honestly, that there shouldn't have been a sequel if there wasn't much to differentiate it from the previous film, or films, if you will. Overall, I'm probably going to have to give this, 6 out of 10? 6.5 out of 10? Because like I said, those first 15 to 20 minutes were absolute perfection. Then the movie pretty much dipped to like a 3 out of 10, maybe, I don't know. It kind of evens out. Not to say that the stuff after was bad, it just started getting super boring and repetitive. Overall, the Lost Dimensions franchise is a pretty good one. While filled with flaws and things you can rip apart to shreds, it is overall pretty enjoyable. Anyway, this is just my opinion. Don't let it taint your view of the franchise or anything, or send hate to Apocalypse. I just wanted to make this video just because. Try out something new, you know? Anyway, in case you're interested in my tier list ranking of how these things go, I'd probably have to say Lost Dimensions 1, B tier, Lost Dimensions 2, C tier, and Lost Dimensions 3, D tier. That's ranking out of enjoyment, of course. Ranking out of which one is the better movie, I'd probably swap tiers between Lost Dimensions and Lost Dimensions 2. But yeah, that's it. Tell me your thoughts on the franchise or like the individual movies in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share, all that. And yeah, make sure to smile.